Hi, hello, it is Reene here. Today I'm going to be doing my current favourite reads that I have read recently and I have loved. So just before I leave, I would like to talk about books that I have loved reading but I am unable to bring with me to university. So the first book is The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, and if you haven't heard of this book already, it is incredibly heartfelt and so light and fluffy, but it deals with quite difficult topics to think about, like identity and also about survival. So if you don't know about this book, it's basically a book about Linus Baker. He is a caseworker at the Department in charge of magical youth, and he is in charge of looking at orphanages that magical children and children who have abilities of magic. He's there to check if the orphanages are good and up and running. He's also there to make sure if the children are happy there and if they are content with their lives, basically. And he is very by the rule book, and I relate to that completely. But he is very strict and he doesn't like to break rules at all. When he is summoned by the extremely upper management to take on a case that is very confidential and very, I guess, dangerous in the beginning, he accepts this case and goes to this orphanage by the Cerulean Sea, and we follow his story from there. I have to say, I had no idea going into this book and I absolutely loved it. I love TJ Klune's writing. It feels almost like a fairy tale. This book definitely surpasses age range because I feel that children can read this, teenagers, young adult people can read this. The writing is just incredible. It just makes you feel so magical. It kind of brings a childlike wonder to you. We're following Linus Baker and we are experiencing things through him. He doesn't actually have a lot of exposure at all in his life, so we experience things firsthand, almost in a realization at these things can happen kind of way. I absolutely love the love story that bloomed between Linus and Arthur. It's just so sweet. It's just shy of 400 pages, but I tell you, it does not feel like 400 pages. It does not feel like 390 pages. It is so quick to read, it is magical, and the children here are what makes the book for me. I love the children here as well. So this is the first book that I am recommending. The second book I would like to recommend is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I read this most recently around a few weeks ago and the story has stayed with me ever since. I loved this book and what it is trying to tell the whole world. This book is about Donna, and she just moved into her home with her husband Kevin. When she was unpacking her books, she suddenly felt dizzy, and somehow, some way, one way or another, she time traveled 150 years into the past, and first thing she sees is a boy drowning. So she leapt into her instincts and saved this boy. From there on, we find out how these two characters are connected and we follow their story from there. Honestly, this story is harrowing and it makes me so cross at how can anybody treat someone like that, a human being, a sentient being, someone who has feelings and emotions. I just can't believe people can be so cruel and how they can be so desensitized at how slavery is so readily accepted. It is crazy how slavery can just grasp a hold of you and just make you accept that this is how the way things are, and people can choose the easier option and just ignore what is morally right and just live an easier life. We follow the perspective of Dana, but we also come to realize the different scenarios and situations of the little boy Rufus and how her husband, a white man, goes back into time 150 years ago. Also, we also get a perspective of how other African Americans feel about slavery, how children being brought up in this kind of environment feel about slavery. It's just insane. The writing of Octavia E. Butler is concise and to the point, but I think that it makes this book all the more difficult and thought-provoking to read because sentences are short. It is gut-wrenching. This is actually science fiction. It includes time travel, but time travel is kind of just like a plot device, I feel. The most important element of this is Donna's story. I completely recommend this book if you haven't read it already. The next book I would like to recommend is Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. It's such a cute cover. I love this green. This book is about Barrington. People call him Barry. He is an Antiguan born and bred, and he is in love with a man named Morris. At this point of the novel, it is in 2010. We follow his story from the day he was born up to all the way into 2010. We weave in and out of his memories and also his past and how this has come to affect him as a person and how it has shaped him as a person. We also follow the perspective of the wife, Carmel, who is in a different format, which kind of like in a stream of consciousness format, and we also follow her perspective from the past all the way to 2010 to the present. I think it gives such a fascinating perspective on both sides on how they both feel about Barry's love for Morris that he has never told anyone. Barry is just coming to terms with how in 2010 people are obviously more accepting of the LGBTQIA plus community. We kind of follow his everyday life, and I wouldn't say big action things happen, but we just follow his story and we follow his relationships with people around him and how his love for Morris affects not just him alone, but people that are close to him. When I was reading this, I was kind of reminded not of queer love, but just how people of the past have such a difficult time to grasp ideas of now and the present, and it makes me think about how my own grandparents are kind of struggling to keep up with the world, if you can say it like that. Back then and now it's so different. Even though he thinks he is well adapted, we can tell from his inner dialogue that he isn't completely accepting of the current situation, the current beliefs of people now. Now, don't get me wrong, he is a very funny man, he is very lovable, but he has done things that obviously bad decisions, and we are looking at the effect of what these decisions have caused. I've really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just kind of wished that there is a type of resolution at the end, because I think that the ending tied up too conveniently, but other than that, the bulk of the book, I absolutely enjoyed it and I really recommend it. The next book I have is Deeplight by Frances Hardinge. I bought this book completely as a cover buy, as I thought that this was beautiful. This is such an interesting cover and how lovely it was. And I was also intrigued by the map inside. It's very tiny, but I just thought it was very fascinating. This book is about Hark and his best friend Jelt. This deals with their relationship as best friends slash brothers, and we follow along their journey. This is a coming of age teenager story, so he is quite young and he is learning how to survive in this world, being poor, trying to get by and doing what he can to literally just live another day. This book worships a lot of sea creatures as their gods. Ever since they were young, people are told of stories of how the gods are dangerous. They keep creating wars in between people, and they are brutal, and they are basically insane. But Hark has always been fascinated by these gods, and he is trying to survive in this world by being a con artist, telling stories which are half-truths and half-lies just in order to live another day. One day he is called upon a mission because Jelt asks him to do it, and because Jelt is his best friend, he does do it. He gets caught and he is sent to his exile in another island to serve the priests of these gods. But because all the gods have died, they are now kind of redundant, so these priests all stay in this building structure in an island. I didn't know what I was getting into when I bought this book, but it is about toxic relationships with friends. It is about being in love with stories and keeping them alive and telling them to another person, because stories are just magnificent things and they keep people believing and hoping. The world building in this book is absolutely fantastic. If you love sea stories, if you love stories about the ocean, this is a beautiful story to read. Frances Hardinge's world building is just phenomenal. She ties in plot devices from these gods to these priests to these buildings, how the ships are connected, the roots and the legends of these gods all tie in together so beautifully that it is just kind of mind-blowing. I have to show you the gods page because it's at the back. It is so fascinating at how she is so creative to create gods like this that are monstrous but are interesting. This is absolutely crazy. I remember reading this book and just being so awed at how someone can be so imaginative. I loved reading Hawke's story. I was rooting for him from the start. I mean, he isn't the most perfect character. He is trying to just survive in this really hard world, and he tells lies, he tricks people, and he also steals things, but at the end of the day he is trying to get by doing what he can, and he realizes his mistakes, and he also tries to turn over a new leaf, especially with someone who is so mean and emotionally abusive to him. His best friend Jelt is just so horrible. We as a reader, we can tell that he is just being an absolute jerk. We are rooting for Hawke in the story and I absolutely love it. But yes, I do recommend this book. The next two books are classics that I have read and I absolutely loved. So the first one is Stoner by John Williams, and this is just, I guess you can count it slice of life kind of classic. This is about William Stoner. We follow from his childhood all the way up to his death, how he grapples with love and how he grapples with friendship, how he comes to find a love for literature and all things to do with writing and words. In a way, this book kind of reminded me of Jane Austen in such a way that we follow him through his day-to-day. He is a very quiet and introverted man, but he is also in a way thoughtful and caring, and he is passionate with his studying of literature. Stoner is a son from a farming family, and his father decides to send him to university to study agriculture. And as Stoner goes to university to study agriculture, he decides that yes, he is learning a lot more, but he isn't feeling a thrill. And one day when he is taking a module of English literature, he fell in love so deeply that he completely changed his course and decided to study English literature in the university. And we also follow him from there, his life as a university teacher, how he met his wife, his horrible wife. But this story is just about life. It talks about how life is a fleeting thing and you just have to do something that you really love or you might regret it. It talks about decisions that you think are the best that you could do at the point of time, and then later in the future when you look back you're thinking, oh, this actually isn't a very good decision, why did I do that? We also have conversations of family relationships, kind of generational trauma in this book as well. I really loved the writing in this book. The tone of the writing is kind of in despair, but there's just a hint of hope, and it just makes you really want to go on and cheer for Stoner. He doesn't give up and he perseveres in the face of hardship, and this is a book that gives you kind of the willpower to just go on one more step, one more day. And I really love this book, so I definitely recommend this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, the last classic I would like to talk about is Tess of Derbyvilles by Thomas Hardy. I think Thomas Hardy is now one of my favorite authors, up there with Jane Austen. Absolutely incredible. I love his writing. His nature writing is just brilliant. It makes you see the world in a different light. just beautiful, breathtaking, absolutely gorgeous writing of nature. Okay, so this book is about Tess. One day her father is walking home and he meets a parson, and he wonders why this parson calls him Sir John, and through that we find out that Tess's family is descendants of the ancient derbyvilles, who are knights from a king long ago during the reign of monarchy in Britain. What happened is that Tess's mum manages to convince Tess to go to the nearest relatives of Derbyville and claim kin, and Tess does exactly that, and we follow her story from then on. This book made me so angry and so cross at how women are treated at this point of time. It is harrowing, and also it makes me so mad at the unjust opinions of people back then gave to Tess just because of what so happened fell to her life, and they were just so unfairly opinionated as we follow Tess, who is so determined on just surviving as well, just trying to navigate her life in this Victorian England. It was so difficult. It was so difficult to read, especially since women back then were so unfairly treated. It was crazy. It was crazy. I felt like I was also kind of reading a history lesson when I was reading this book, and I loved how Thomas Hardy was critical with the Victorian society and how he doesn't agree with how society back then functioned. So I like his, I guess in a way it's kind of like a manifesto of his own beliefs and his voice in rebelling against the Victorian society. But yes, this is incredible to read. It is quite a chunker, so if you feel ready to tackle such a thick book, I definitely recommend this book. That is all the books that I would like to recommend today. This brings us to the end of the video. If you're not subscribed already, please consider doing so and give the video a like if you liked my recommendations. Please do comment also if you have read any of these books. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!